Bitcoin on the daily. So now we're talking high time frame context of things. Um, of course, we do want to keep in the back of our mind that idea of, hey, if we were ever going to find, this lower high on the weekly chart, then somewhere around this region is the ideal place to do that at. So that means less than or equal to this region. So it can be right here, right now. It can be anywhere, prior to this. It just needs to be, we would assume it just needs to be below this region, right? Meaning, if we start to reclaim that zone, then we'll stop entertaining that argument that all of a sudden is not very, very relevant. And it's not very relevant as of right now either. So it becomes relevant when we start to show weakness the same way that we've shown weakness for all of this downtrend, right? So this price action is where things turn different. This is where we've adjusted and we've come in with a brand new mindset that was, hey, let's anticipate further upside, right? And since then, we've been rewarded with about a 10% bounce. And as of right now, we're only sitting about, 4%, which we're assuming is unrealized gains because we haven't even reached our area of interest, but it is what it is, right? So we're going to talk about how if you started to adjust to this mindset, how you can sort of work your way inversely to now make probabilistic assumptions on weakness into areas of interest to buy back in on what you're assuming is a high time frame uptrend into an eventual like speculative bearish argument on a macro, right? A very, very macro trend, that weekly lower high, lower low analysis, and sort of just domino effect your way and snowball, right? That snowball mentality of we're starting to build a little bit of weakness. So if I haven't started to take profits, then maybe I want to do so right now, right? So we're going to do that. First, let's talk about why is that region so important, right? If we were ever going to find a lower high in the weekly, that region is important to me because there's confluence. So confluence sticks out to me, meaning if there's a lot of things hovering in one general zone, then I can further justify or unjustify certain ideas, right? So if we can break above a 200 daily EMA, a 200 daily MA, a 47K daily supply zone, as well as you can also talk about the yearly open. All right, so let's go ahead and mark that out. This is January, so the year starts and we open right there. 46.2 on Coinbase, right? So we have a lot of confluence in this region. So that makes us think, hey, if we're able to reclaim the yearly open, if we're able to reclaim the 200 daily EMA, if we're able to reclaim the 200 daily MA, if we're able to reclaim the 47K daily supply zone, and we already know that this trend, right, as of this break in our structure, which we can see on lower time frames, is already bullish, then why would this stop us? Why would this stop us? Why, if that's not going to stop us and that's not going to stop us, and all of a sudden we break out again, what's going to stop us from entering price discovery? Right? So it's the context. And again, it's just assumptions. We're assuming things based off of our perceived probabilities, right? So we're saying if we were ever going to find a weekly lower high and continue a very high time frame downtrend, whether you see it like that or whether you see it like this, right, where we have a break in the structure and now we're in search of a lower high, and we would assume that this is the region to do that at. Therefore, if we don't put in any sort of weekly lower high at that region, we would assume that we're not going to find a lower high on the weekly at all. And we stop entertaining any sort of bearish argument at that point, really. So on every time frame. Um, so the way that we're kind of validating the current bullish mindset, and I say that as we're breaking down today's market update was literally called a hint of weakness, right? Makes us think a deeper pullback is on its way. The way that we're validating this bullish mindset is the same way that we managed to validate the bearish mindset for the 3 months prior. We're using things like daily market structure, 4-hour 200 moving averages, and whatever key zone is around us at that time. So, had we broken out and reclaimed the 4-hour 200s, broken our daily market structure bullish, we would have also said, hey, that 59K weekly supply zone, that nice horizontal gray box that Merck has drawn in his chart, we're going to throw that in as confluence to all of that analysis and say, since we're above that zone, we're probably bullish. It's probably go time, yada, yada. Right. Of course, as long as we're still below it, it all acts as confluence in resistance, confluence in a bearish argument. And by all means, we saw that bearish argument continue. Same exact thing over here, right? 4-hour 200s, things like daily market structure. And this time around, we're validating that analysis further with confluence with something like our 53K daily supply zone. So we're tacking that on to everything, right? Same exact idea, same exact idea. So most recently, we're validating that analysis further by using the exact same trend that Bitcoin not only loves historically, but also recently, right? The same way that we the same way that we validated a bearish mindset for all of this price action, we're now using it to invalidate that bearish mindset and validate a new bullish mindset and whatever expectations come along with that for you. Meaning, hey, Merck, maybe we do just go up to 47K, smack our face on that ideal region for a weekly supply zone, blah, 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 whatever, and then break back down and then, start the bear market all over again, yada, yada. Hey, Merck, maybe we do reclaim that zone and then we see a little bit bigger of a wick up and we see this 53K region. And by the way, we are going to put in a weekly lower high, just not at your ideal zone where you thought we would. And then we resume the bear market, right? And then we're no longer to justify a bullish mindset. Or hey, Merck, we're going to go to 59K and then bear market. Or hey, Merck, we're never going to see these prices ever again. Hyper Bitcoinization, all time high, price discovery, whatever it is, right? Whatever your expectation is for price action, as long as it is favoring upside, it becomes a lot more probable as soon as you do this. So we're just going to expect whatever the next resistance level is. Meaning to me, that means I'm fully expecting this zone. So far, so good. We got pretty damn close, right? So as long as, and this is the part that goes along with that, the invalidation, as long as we don't do things that resemble weakness, we can continue expecting this region. Today's market update was the first hint that, hey, maybe we should expect a deeper pullback into something like all of this confluence in support to maybe put in a higher low to our market structure, which was previously finding lower highs and lower lows, right? You could say lower highs, lower lows, lower high, lower low, lower high, and that's a higher high, right? We know market structure consists of two things, not just highs and not just lows, right? You need both. So if we were going to find a higher low in our daily, this is the ideal region to do so, meaning anywhere above or equal to. But if below, we would assume, hey, that weekly lower high is probably in already. And at that point, we wouldn't expect a higher low in our daily anywhere higher than this low. We would kind of just more assume that this entire move is a fluke so that we could find a weekly lower high only to resume the downtrend that we know our weekly chart is already in, right? Technically speaking. So that is the true invalidation. That is when the macro market environment shifts bearishly and we need to shift out of this bullish mindset that we made just 6 days ago, right? And 10% ago or whatever. So that's how we can no longer validate the bullish mindset on a macro perspective. And from there, we would kind of just go back into the same exact mindset that we had for all of this price action: lower highs, lower lows, one support into the next, break it, keep going down, right? As long as we're still above that region, there's always going to be the chance that our daily finds a higher low somewhere above this zone or maybe at this zone, and smacks everything back bullish again, only to resume the uptrend. And then, right, we don't know what happens from there. Maybe a weekly lower high, maybe 53K, maybe 59, maybe price discovery, whatever. So the hint of weakness, right? We're still kind of just keeping that in the back of our mind. We want to acknowledge the hourly 200 moving averages. They are pretty solid, local tops, local bottoms intraday. Price action does respect them pretty nicely, so we want to acknowledge them. So, with that said, are they relevant as of right here, right now? Meaning, are they uh, key to this local trend that we've managed to sustain for, I don't know, past 6 days or so, right? Past week or so? Is it relevant to this sort of price action? No. Is it relevant here, right? Is it relevant here? Is it relevant for this price action? What about this price action? It's still pretty relevant. You got chopped up a little bit, but in hindsight, still pretty relevant, right? So we're using relevancy to determine, hey, should we be watching these? And as of right now, we can't honestly come in and say that we need to be paying attention to these hourly 200s and that we should be expecting them to be tested anytime soon, right? They're not relevant. They are not the local trend. So the way I like to think about this is there's three trends. There's a macro trend, which is going to be something like those 4 hour 200s, your daily market structure, key levels, stuff like that. There's a more local trend, which would be something like these hourly 200s. And very seldom you see something like a parabolic trend when things really start to go vertical. So once that parabolic trend breaks, whatever it is, all of a sudden now we have a bigger probability, right? A better chance to, at the very least, see a deeper pullback into this local trend, the hourly 200s. And then maybe, because they do somewhat get respected as of recent, maybe from there we see them act as some sort of higher low, uh, macro support for a much higher time frame, right? 4 hour market structure shifts bullish again after testing them, whatever. Or maybe the local trend breaks and we have to test our higher time frame trend, right? That ideal swing long zone, which we have macro support there and a ton of confluence. So what is the local trend? And this is why today's market update was labeled hint of weakness. It's because the exact same trend that we've managed to hold for the past week is now broken. And you could label this a deviation. Yes, that is very scary, but in hindsight, access support nonetheless. Access support, support. This was that CPI, volatility, whatever shakeout. Hindsight was still support. Trend is still trending, right? We say that now. Is that still true right here, right now? No, because we broke down and we bearish retested our parabolic trend, right? Which means we have a better chance to break down and test something like a local trend. And who knows what happens from there? Maybe that local trend holds and we reclaim, right, and show strength all over again. And in hindsight, this was probably our local bottom. Maybe that local trend does not hold, and we end up testing a much higher time frame trend with more macro support levels, and then we reclaim and show strength and keep going and whatever. Or maybe we come down, test here, can't even manage to hold there, and all of a sudden that's where we stop making any sort of bullish arguments for the unforeseen future, right? So that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about this. So hopefully everybody sees like how I'm thinking about things in terms of like a snowball analysis or like a domino effect. And each domino that gets knocked over, we're just going to assume that the next one gets knocked over as well. And we see how long that domino sort of effect keeps going until it stops, and then we have to readjust. So that also means that if this ends up being nothing and this is the extent of, hey, we lost that parabolic trend and we begin to reclaim, right? Let's say this momentum shifts favorably again, we reclaim these 15-minute 200s. Let's say we break out above this supply zone on like our hourly chart, then in hindsight this was probably a local bottom, and that was likely to be the extent of the dip. And from there we would kind of just anticipate that our next area of interest would get hit. right? Because the local trend is bullish. So that's how I'm kind of breaking it down and just working with justification, expectation, and validation. And that works from a low scale. You can scale that up higher, and it works inversely as well, right? So that's to say, like, inversely meaning I can justify expecting further upside if we manage to reclaim this lower time frame sort of trend, right? So that is why today's market update was labeled first hint of weakness or something along those lines. So ETHUSD, very similar analysis. If we were ever going to find a lower high on our weekly chart, I would assume that this is the general region, right, where you would probably do so at. And I say general, and I definitely mean general, right? We're talking about like a 10% range. I'm not trying to be a genius here. I'm not trying to say that this is the exact Pico top, and from here we only go down for the rest of forever. I'm not doing that. I'm rather just kind of saying somewhere in this region, if we were ever going to find a lower high on the weekly and then continue something like a bear market or see ETH go to zero or whatever, then somewhere in that region we would do that at. Meaning, just like Bitcoin, if we manage to reclaim this region as well, that argument probably goes out the window as it's no longer likely for us to find any sort of weekly lower high. And so just so everybody can see what I'm talking about, right? If you were to assess weekly structure, high, low, higher high, lower low, right? So now you're pending a potential lower high to just simply continue this massive downtrend on a very high time frame scale. So it's a scary thought. Yes, it is. But as long as the lower time frames remain bullish, there's no reason to fully entertain that idea, right? Which is why I'm not willing to come in here and say, by the way, this is the exact macro top for the weekly, and we only go down for the rest of forever from here. It's not applicable to right here, right now, today, because on high time frames, right, higher time frames than hourly, so still high time frame, but obviously lower time frame than the weekly, we're still bullish. So how are we justifying that bullish mindset? Well, truthfully, I would not argue that we have broken our daily market structure bullishly, like we did for Bitcoin. I see some people could probably make an argument as to this being a high, this is a higher low, and this is a higher high. Truthfully, I just kind of see this as all one leg upwards. So in my head, this is still a lower high on the daily chart. I need more than just one or two downside candles before resuming uptrend to really convince me that this is a swing, right? High to low. So the way that I'm seeing this is our daily market structure is still bearish, which is a different sort of context than it is for Bitcoin. But I'm validating any sort of bullish mindset by also saying, hey, we've managed to do something different that we haven't managed to do since early December. Right? We've reclaimed a trend and we've reclaimed a key level along with that trend. We haven't broken our market structure bullish as of yet, right? But we can maybe assume that we're going to, since we've done something massively different that we haven't managed to do in the past 2 months or so. So same exact argument pretty much for ETH as we have for Bitcoin. The levels are pretty similar as well as, we have this region. It's acting as the validation to any sort of bullish mindset that we could ever possibly have in the like mid to long term. Therefore, if we lose that zone, we can no longer justify any sort of bullish expectations, right? At that point, it does seem like this ETH daily bearish market structure has in fact held true to just simply resume, or maybe even worse than that, our weekly has already found its lower high, and then we can go on in search of what's implied to be a lower low. So things get pretty bleak and scary at that point, but until then, support is support, right? We're acknowledging, hey, this is something different. And you have to prove to me, right? As a bear, you have to prove to me why I need to give up my hope. Because this price action says hope to me, just like this price action did as well, right? The opportunity cost of missing out, right, and hoping and praying that um, this ends up being a fluke. We break back down, downtrend for the rest of, who knows, forever, maybe just 4K, maybe somewhere in between, maybe ETH goes to zero. The opportunity cost that you pay is not very high, meaning uh, it it should be very easy to adjust to a new sort of set of information once this scariness starts to occur, meaning you're not paying much of an opportunity cost by being bullish here, right? Because your invalidation is this. Once you break down, that tells you, hey, by the way, that was a fluke. Whereas when you had this mindset here, the same exact mindset that we have right now for ETH, and even though it doesn't work and you're very wrong, and every bear comes in and screams, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so, note that they did the exact same thing here. And while you still paid a very low opportunity cost, this time around you were rewarded by 50% of gain, right? Over the course of a month. And the time prior to that, this time's different, this time's different, this time's different. If you're wrong, you'll know this is where you're wrong. You suffer 5, maybe 10% loss at worst. If you're right, you gained 90%. You want to put yourself in positions where you take things at face value, and from there, you're either right or you're forced to adjust. So, truthfully, you can give me whatever bearish narrative you want. I'm not going to entertain it until price action forces me to adjust. And from there, just the same way how we adjusted here, how we adjusted here, and how we readjusted after acknowledging, hey, this is a range and this is the breakdown from the range. So that means we're probably bearish trending. And here we are finding resistance and lower highs, lower lows on our daily, right? Then I'll come in and tell you, oh, by the way, you were right. This move up was a fluke. Maybe we found a lower high in our weekly chart, blah, 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 yada, yada. But until then, it's really not hurting you too much if you're playing the long game, right? Which I would assume everyone here is. If you're playing the long game, being bullish on this price action is not going to hurt you. You suffer, as of right now, maybe 7% loss before you come in and say, oh, damn, that was a fluke. Whereas, who knows what your reward is if you're never forced to adjust, meaning if you are right. 50%, 90%. Let's see, what was the time before that? We could say something like, let's go from not this test, not this test, somewhere in between, right? 130%. It's more rewarding, right? And when you understand and apply that uh, concept of opportunity cost, it is the more appealing approach. Whether it works out this time or not, it is a winner's mindset at the end of the year, right? Not at the end of the day, but at the end of the year, it is a winner's mindset. So that's going to be the approach that I take for ETH, just like we are for Bitcoin. It's the exact same sort of context, right? ETH BTC, however, has not changed. So you can give me bullish arguments, narratives, whatever you want. I'm not going to entertain them until we reclaim the exact same region that has consistently acted as macro bottoms and macro tops since August of 2021, right? And here we are testing it as resistance. So in my head, how can I justify this time or this time is any different than this time, which was no different than that time, which if we flipped it on its head was no different than this time, this time, and if we flipped it on its head again, right? How can I assume that? I can't justify it. So if you're expecting upside, how are you justifying it? If not a narrative, if not a speculative idea, right? If not just words that truthfully don't mean anything. You could tell me, oh, by the way, ETH 2.0, we're burning this much supply, X, Y, and Z. Elon Musk said this about ETH, and that's so absurdly bullish, and ETH flipping narrative, blah, 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 whatever, right? And I would tell you, oh, there's a monkey stuck in a tree somewhere in, I don't know, Australia, right? Is that bullish too? Is that bullish for ETH? Right? They're just words. So how are we able to justify it? My honest answer is I'm not. I'm not able to justify it. If we go on to do something along these lines, then how am I going to be able to justify any expectation of further downside? Just like we are for Bitcoin and ETH, and it has rewarded us with 10% of what we'll say is unrealized gains, right, at maximum so far since 6 days ago. We wouldn't be able to justify a bearish mindset at that point. So we would not entertain a bearish mindset at that point, right? But until then, I take the chart at face value for what it is. And what it is it's a downtrend, and it has been a downtrend since around late December when we first acknowledged it. So as long as nothing changes, we're not going to change either. And truthfully, I think we can really stop there. I don't think dominance is too important right now. Dominance kind of expanding upwards or trying to from testing those 4-hour 200s, which we also respect pretty nicely. And that's really about it. Typically, you want to see ETH, BTC, and Bitcoin dominance move inverse to each other. And that is just to say, and I know I sound like a broken record because everyone watching this, the same people that watch these live streams all the time. That is to say, hey, if the king of altcoins can't hold up well against Bitcoin, then altcoins probably can't hold up well against Bitcoin. So to see them moving inverse to each other adds a little bit more confluence and validation to our assessment, right? So when dominance starts to change, we can assume that ETH BTC is also changing, meaning the environment for altcoins across the board is probably changing. But until that happens, we're not going to entertain those arguments. So that's really about it. Is there anything that you guys want to see? I see Hawkeye wants Cody USD. Any questions or comments or anything before we move on to on-demand TA? No? We'll do USDT. Probably has the most volume. Or Binance. Zoom out. Get rid of this. All right. Pretty weird chart. So, honestly, if you were to look at this on something like a 3-day chart, this looks something like my nightmares, where it's just constantly a grind downwards. And I think that sort of analysis is really only applicable to something like a 3-day or maybe even a weekly, because this daily market structure is a lot less clear, right? So you have this like higher low here, then you have a lower high, and then a lower low, and then you have lower high, lower low, high, higher low, and maybe we're in the process of creating a higher high right now. Um, whether we're in the process of creating a higher high or our market structure is flipping bullish on the daily or whatever, we have to ask ourselves, right, is that strength? And strength, there's a reason why we attach so many things to strength. It's so that we can be able to justify, hey, is this strength? But more so, we can be able to unjustify, right? And acknowledge that this doesn't really mean anything yet until we tack on a couple more arguments onto it. So, my analysis and my definition of what is strength has been and will always be are we reclaiming key levels, and are we flipping the trend bullishly? So whether your market structure is flipping the trend bullishly or not, right? And this is coming from someone who uses market structure in every analysis they make, it doesn't really matter unless you manage to continue along with that analysis. So if you can't reclaim this region, or let's say, do these 200 daily moving averages get respected? And I would say yes, they do, right? High time frame pivot, high time frame pivot, pivot, and support. Little choppy, support, for the most part, resistance. Right. So in my humble opinion, pretty decent level of, hey, we should expect some sort of resistance around them, meaning I'm not going to be too eager to assess this as strength until we reclaim them. So that would be the second part to that argument. Along with that, you would have to reclaim this daily supply zone that you're currently struggling at. So that would be something like a very high time frame trend, right? And if we're breaking things down, high time frame and then local trend, right? This is still pretty high time frame, but a more local trend would be something like these 4-hour 200s, which also get pretty nicely respected as pretty big pivot levels. So along with reclaiming this zone, you could also say, as confluence to, hey, is this strength or is it not? You would also reclaim your 4-hour 200 moving averages. And so, are we reclaiming them? Are we still just in the process of testing them as resistance before, continuing this like painful dream of, or painful nightmare of downtrend? And that's up to you to say. The way that I see it might be different than the way that you see it. Truthfully, in order for you to comfortably call this a breakout retest, flip as support, anything like that, from a textbook perspective, you want to be able to see it visibly. Meaning, if this is a 4-hour level, or if you're using 4-hour 200 moving averages, you want to be able to physically see it like you did here, or you could say here, or even here, to comfortably say, hey, we are breaking out and retesting this region as support. These are all 4-hour candles. I can physically see breakout retest, and I will expect this time's different expansion. Tack that on to my argument of strength. I know that maybe my daily market structure is bullish at that point, right? So we can say, did you flip the trend bullishly? Yes. Did you reclaim key levels? Also, yes. And we can go from there. Let's look for a bigger move up to those 200 daily moving averages. That's TP1. That would be TP2. Who knows? Maybe we break that. TP3, so on and so forth, right? So that's textbook. And then what goes along with that is, the not so fun side, which is not everything's always going to be butterflies and dandelions. And who knows? Maybe this was your breakout retest, and maybe you just sort of expanded and went vertical from there, right? It happens pretty often, but in the long term, I think you're safer by waiting for that textbook sort of perspective. That's my mindset, at least. Right? I would wait for something like this rather just than just immediately assume. Let's see if we can find a good example. Rather than just immediately assume, like, I don't know, inversely, that this is a breakdown. Right? Full blown breakdown to the trend. We get a couple 4-hour candles, crazy wick, only to reclaim it and continue moving upwards. Something like that. Right? Or just calling this a breakout retest. This time's different. Blah blah blah. Whatever. We'll move in, or we'll scale down into that lower time frame one more time. See if our hourly is showing us anything. Hourly 200s seem to be pretty solid. I think for locally, you might be able to find something a little bit better. Hmm, maybe not. I wanted to to think that this was going to be, a local trend. Let's see. Oh, maybe hourly is the best we can do. So it's not pretty. It's not clean by any means. Historically, they are very well respected. Right, so I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. And then breakout retest, like we said, this is, we could say, a 4 hour level with our hourly 200s. You could physically see breakout, pullback, retest, right? So that's hey, this time's different. Want to go long into whatever the next resistance level is, and who knows, maybe further than that. And eventually losing that region, right, means more downtrend, and then you respect those hourly 200s all over again as resistance. So then breakout retest, we can physically see it. Hey, this time's different. Let me look for my next resistance level. So historically, it doesn't get much cleaner than this for the hourly 200s. Locally, it's not amazing, right? You could maybe say this is the start of something different. This starts to really be the thing that convinces me. This starts to be my invalidation, where I kind of just assume that the trend has finished, right? Same way I would have assumed that here, same way I would have assumed that back here, only for us to chop our way back over these hourly 200s again, somewhat respect them as support, and grind along this resistance level with our 4 hour 200 moving averages. So more or less, these hourly 200s are going to be the sort of validation to say, like, hey, this was probably your lower high on your daily or whatever. Your 4 hour 200s have held true as resistance. You should probably expect further downside. But you want as much confluence along with that as you possibly can. So maybe something like on a lower time frame, you could say like a loss of our hourly 200s and this demand zone, right? Something like that. Something to convince you a little bit more, because they're not clear enough locally to be convincing enough by themselves. But overall, that's how I would take, or that's how I would approach Coty. Is there anything else that you guys want? Not going to be here until Monday, right? You won't hear from me until Monday. I mean, obviously, market updates, but Extreme is 2 days from now, 3 days from now. So speak now or hold your peace until then. No? Nobody has anything? All right, guys. Well, you gave me two pretty easy, nice, quick live streams back to back. It's always very much appreciated. You guys are making my job easy. Hopefully, some more, I don't know, interaction with you guys come soon. Maybe you just don't want anything. That's perfectly fine. Um, but I will say the value that you get from these streams are going to be directly correlated to how much, participation that we have. So, um, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for coming in, spending your Friday with me. It's always very much appreciated. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I will see you again on Monday. So take it easy, everybody.